Hi everyone, welcome back to my classroom. Today's video is specific for the reading How to Read Like a Writer by Mike Bunn. If you want to read the article, the link is below in the description. Thank you, Mr. Bunn, for making this available for all of us. It's a great article if you're a college student or if you just want to read and learn. This video is specific for vocabulary for this article, and honestly, I don't know how much it will help you if you haven't read the article or you don't have the article with you. I have my article. So if you're interested in vocabulary development and you want to look at the vocabulary in this video, then it's here for you. You can also refer to the accompanying video examining how to read like a writer under my class lecture playlist. So here we go. Let's look at some vocabulary today. This is the vocabulary review for the article How to Read Like a Writer by Mike Bunn. If you want to practice the vocabulary that I am identifying as important, I have designed for you a list at vocabulary.com, and you can see this up here. If you go to this link, vocabulary.com, you do have to create a free account at vocabulary.com. But if you do that, then you can go and you can practice this specific vocabulary. For this video, I have color-coded the vocabulary because if you have watched my How to Study Vocabulary video, one of the things that's very helpful is to consider the big four, and the big four are your verb, noun, adjective, and adverb. So that's the vocabulary that I'm focused on. I've color-coded it here for you with verb being yellow, noun being green, blue being adjective, and pink being adverb. As we go through this video, I'm not going to specifically be looking up the language for you because you can do that on your own. I suggest a really good dictionary. I personally like Merriam-Webster. Merriam-Webster.com is a free resource. There's also a Merriam-Webster for language learners if you're trying to look up idioms and connotations and things like that. What I'm going to be doing for you with this particular language is basically reading it so you can hear it and adding any things that occur to me as I look at it. For definitions, though, you have to look those up on your own. Let's start then with the first verb, which is fend. I was pretty sure that if there was any trouble, I'd be running down the back stairs, leaving the patrons to fend for themselves. Fend is a particularly good verb that you perhaps haven't used it. Fend rather means to take care of yourself. You could use that in class or in a job, and this particular chunk right here, fend for themselves, is an idiomatic collocation in which we often say that, fend for themselves, which basically means take care of yourself. The next vocabulary word that we have is dim. It's not easy trying to read in the dim light of a theater, and we know this is an adjective because, again, I've color-coded it blue. Dim is often used to mean to reduce specifically light. However, we also use that for intelligence. So if we consider someone to be dim or a dimwit, which is an idiomatic term, that means not very bright, which is what dim means, not very bright. The next noun, the next word that we have is shriek. And I like shriek. You probably don't hear shriek a lot. The word that you probably use is yell. Shriek is different than yell, and it's a higher pitched, almost a scream. So here we have, it's even tougher with shrieks and shouts and gunshots coming from the stage because we're talking about a movie, remember. So shriek is a normal count noun, so we make it plural by adding an S. Be really careful with the word shriek because there's an R sound in there. It's not the same as chic. Chic has a completely different meaning. So when you're doing shriek, think of it as a little here, shriek. So it's not chic, it's shriek. But it's a really good word, shriek. Then we move on, scrolling down in your article, and if you've downloaded your article from our class website, I have already identified this vocabulary for you. If not, we're now on page 73. The next adjective is divisive. Divisive is a very good academic adjective. If you look at it and you consider, do you see a word inside divisive? Do you see the word divide? Divide is a verb. Divisive means to kind of separate or irritate. So here the sentence says, what would be the advantages and disadvantages of starting a quote with a quote from a less divisive person, a person who divides someone? So if you're less divisive, that means that you are more acceptable or more easily to get along with. So these two words are often used here, less divisive or more divisive, because this is a comparative. We're comparing one adjective to another, a less divisive person or a more divisive person. And you'll remember with your adjectives we have both the comparative and the superlative forms, so if you're not sure about that, you'll want to review that. Then we're moving on to correspond. Correspond is a verb. It's a really good verb. They correspond to the two ways. There's a lot of connected verbs with this. This is one of the words in our academic word list. We have correspond, correspondence, corresponding. So you'll really want to make sure that you use correspond. It is a good academic verb to be using in your writing. We move on then. We're moving on here. Here's another noun. Not only in the breadth. Breadth is interesting to try to pronounce because the DTH kind of all go together. It's not bread, it's breadth. So the D is almost silent. This is not necessarily a word that you've ever used before. I'm sure that you've heard of depth. Okay, we all use depth. Depth means how deep something is. Breadth means how wide something is. And so it is a good academic word, but it might not be something that you use in your daily conversation. Then we have another adjective here, contextual. Among the contextual factors you'll want to consider before you even start reading are, contextual is a really good verb. Context is one of the forms, and we see it's an adjective because the UAL here. We have intended. Here, intended is used as an adjective. Do you know who the intended audience is for this piece of writing? But attend also has other parts of speech. So notice we're using it as an adjective, but it's not the same kind of adjective as some of the other adjectives. So make sure that you consider the other parts of speech as well. Moving on, we have another verb. You know I like my verbs. Here we have provoke. Provoke is an excellent verb that you should totally have in your academic lexicon so that you're using this in your writing. To provoke analysis and criticisms into the style, structure, and purpose of the writing itself. So if you don't know provoke, make sure you check that verb out. Then we have another adjective, omniscient. Omniscient is very specific. It's often used when talking about God, and so it might not be something that you use in your everyday writing. So this is more of an extra bonus word, but it's still a good word to have. Here is a verb, utilize, and I think you should really be using all of these verbs in your writing. How these different approaches are utilized, notice this is being used in the passive voice. You might normally say use, but utilize is another nice way to say it. Moving on through our reading, we get down to page 78 when we have another verb, cease. I really like the verb cease. You probably use stop, but cease is another way to say stop because the work ceases to be a mere artifact, a stone tablet, and then here is another noun, and becomes instead a living utterance with immediacy and texture. Utterance. Oh, that's nice. Utterance is another word for spoken language, so it's just another way to say that. You might say word, but when a word is spoken, it can be an utterance. Then we move down here to another noun, and this noun is interesting because I'm sure you know the verb consume, but here this is being used as an adjective. And how can we tell? It's probably impossible and definitely too time-consuming. Time is modifying consuming, so this has to be an adjective. And time-consuming often goes together. It co-locates. Things are often time-consuming. So this is a gerund noun here. To identify all the choices the author made. Then we have another verb, to prioritize. Prioritize is a very important verb. We have priority, but prioritize means to put things in a specific order. And in our class, I'm always telling you, you have to prioritize. Just like even in this actual reading, you have to prioritize the language itself. You probably won't be able to own them all, so you have to prioritize them. Here is another noun. It's the depth. We had depth above when we talked about breadth and depth. And remember when you say this, the P is a very soft P. It's depth. The TH is really what's emphasized here. On that specific style, in depth and without distraction. Here is another verb, to arouse, that the author is trying to arouse sympathy in readers. And this right here collocates. We often say arouse sympathy, arouse emotion. So this is a good kind of idiomatic chunk that you're going to want to put in your mind. Moving on then through page 79, page 80, we have another noun, anecdote, and we've talked about anecdotes. Anecdotes is a small story. Anecdotal is an adjective. Using anecdotes is one way to start your essay. So anecdote is a good word to know and to be able to use. Moving on, we have through page 81 down to page 82, antiquated. Now honestly, antiquated is not an adjective that you're probably going to use very much. So if we're prioritizing our language and trying to borrow certain words, antiquated might be a good word to borrow. Because of antiquated fire safety laws, every theater in the city was required to have a certain number of staff members. Antiquated simply means old or outdated or antique. You can see antique in that word. Moving on to page 83, we have a couple of words here. Eliminating, which is being used as a noun. Now, eliminate is often a verb, but in this case, we can see that it's being used as a noun, and we can see that it's a noun gerund because it is the object of the preposition by. By what, if anything, is lost by eliminating so much of the detail. So just because you know a verb or a word, make sure that you always look and see how the part of speech is being used in the text that you're reading. The next word that I pulled out for you is omit. Omit is a really good verb, and you should absolutely be using omit. What you might be using instead is leave out. But as we've talked about, when you can use one specific academic word like omit rather than a more subjective phrasal verb like leave out, it's always better to use the one word rather than the two. I chose to include each of the details that the revised sentence omits. Then we move on here to our only adverb in the piece, prominently. And I thought it was important enough because prominent is a very important adjective and prominently is a nice adverb. And remember, adverbs can really raise the quality of your writing when used correctly. Will Andrew Lloyd Webber figure prominently in the rest of the essay? Another reason I chose this for you is because figure prominently is another idiomatic chunk that collocates. These two words go together. To figure prominently means to be prominent, to show prominent, to be important in the situation. So figure prominently is something that you're going to see over and over again. Here then on 84 we have formulate, which is another verb. We can see the noun formula within that. The goal is to train yourself to formulate questions. Then we have another adjective, obsolete. If the laws are described as antiquated, it means I view them as old-fashioned or obsolete. Unlike antiquated, obsolete is a word that you might be using a lot, so this is a good adjective to add to your personal lexicon. Moving on to page 85, we have a verb here, compel. Reading as a writer would compel me to question what might have brought the author to make these decisions. Compel is a very, very good verb. Here is another noun, attribute. How can I make sure I include some of the good attributes of this writing style into my own? This is a regular noun, so it takes an S to make it plural. And then we have one more adjective here, and it's actually part of the works cited, but it's such an important word I wanted to make sure that you saw it in our reading, vital. You probably use the word important, but personally, vital I think is a little better, mainly just because everybody uses important. And vital basically means important. Here, however, though, vital goes with signs, vital signs, and this is a very specific collocation, often used in medical terminology. So there we go. This is the 27 words from our reading, How to Read Like a Writer by Mike Bunn, and I encourage you to own these words and use as many of these as you can in your own writing. So that was the vocabulary in Mike Bunn's article. You'll see that I didn't go and define all the words for you. I'm actually not a walking, talking dictionary. We have dictionaries for that. My favorite dictionary is Merriam-Webster's. That's the one that I personally use. I use the online version. There's lots of good dictionaries. If you're not sure why we should do vocabulary, then you might want to go back and watch my video on the difference between owning and borrowing vocabulary. Today, we're getting used to this vocabulary and we're starting to make it our friend. So there will be lots more videos like this. Vocabulary is such an important part of language development and writing. If you like this video, then go ahead and give it a like. That's what we need to do. If you want to subscribe to my channel, then you can subscribe to my channel as well and get notification for the rest of the kinds of videos I do. I hope you learned something and got a good idea of why vocabulary is fun and some really great words in this particular reading. So I hope to see you back in my classroom next time.